want to move up within this company, within this airline, if you move around the different departments, it makes you really marketable.
Yeah.
And back then, that old legacy airline was very big on promoting their own, especially when they had experience. The individual had experiences from different departments.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the time that I spent in Chicago, um, after that crash, and then before that was the flight attendant strike. You know, the flight attendant strike, in November.
Hmm.
You know, there
I've
were
heard of it.
changes made.
Yeah.
Right. It was a very, very bad strike. I was also a gate agent in Chicago, and there was a lot of divisiveness that happened around this time.
Oh yeah, it was one of the ugliest strikes
And
I've ever read about, between managers
oh
trying to
yeah, it was
become flight
bad.
attendants when they weren't
They were
even
calling the 10-day
certified.
wonders. 10
Yeah,
days.
10
They
days
were
to
called the
get
10-day
certified
wonders.
and go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
they were
not
called
good.
the 10-day wonders. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because they had in Chicago, they had a room for uh, the flight attendants that I don't want to use that word. I'm gonna say it. I can say it, right?
Say whatever you want.
the, they crossed the line. They were
Yeah,
scabs. That's
the
what they call
scabs.
them.
Yeah,
And yeah, and they crossed the line, and there was a room, and I remember because as a gate agent, we still had to come to work, and a lot of these flight attendants were afraid because a lot of the flight attendants who had struck were threatening them.
yeah.
So I remember all this. But there were planes flying around without empty passengers. I believe the number was 92% of the flight attendants struck. So there were a lot of planes flying around for 5 days without passengers. So American lost a lot of revenue.
Yeah.
So in December of that same year, I want to say it's 94 or 93, 93.
You've been around long enough with this company, with Legacy Airlines and all of its sister partners, that you've seen a lot. You've seen not even what some typical captains that have been here forever have seen, because you've
No.
been with the company in one way, shape, or form, starting out from reservations to gate agent to ramp to everything. You've done it all, and we haven't even gotten into the point where you decided you wanted to be a pilot, and you got to see you got to experience all this. And it's really because from a very young age, you had the people in your circle along your journey that enforced that you look at the big picture, that you don't just
Mhm.
have the tunnel vision with a particular career, and then you were always, chess pieces moving around your strategic journey in your career and in your life, and you've been able to witness all of this stuff. And you mentioned something. I just want to make sure that our younger listeners understand this, because today we have what we call pilots associations, right? We call it unions, kind of like you call tissue Kleenex. It's a name brand. It's not all tissue is Kleenex. And we call them associations, and they're very important, and we need
Right.
them, and we need to make
Right.
sure that we have protections, and that we're not forced to always underbid our fellow pilot, man, woman, whatever. But a generation or two ago, we had what was called unions. And when you
Yes.
crossed a picket line, when it was legal for people to picket, because now we're under the Transportation Industry, the Railway Labor Act, look it up, Google it. Now you have to have permission from a judge and all that kind of stuff. So you don't really, you see informational picketing, which Legacy Airlines and its sister company did very recently, just
Mhm.
last year. But you don't see strikes. And you lived through a strike that, though it wasn't your department, it affected everything. And one could even argue, with that reduction in workforce, kind of sounds like what we're going through today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And let me throw this in. Let me just throw this in, how I experienced the strike at the Legacy airline. Um, some of the flight attendants were going around the terminal taking photos for the union. There was one particular gate agent manager. She was from France. Forgot her name, but I can probably, if I really search, can get her name. She stopped this flight attendant, and she grabbed the flight attendant's hand to take the camera away, which you really can't do that in today's environment. Um, so obviously, the flight attendant called security, and she made a big deal about the manager grabbing her hand.
Of course.
Um, the manager, I had to go to court as a witness.
Wow. Yeah.
I
mean,
did.
things were ruthless
I
back
did.
then. And
It
now
was ruthless.
we're all, oh, you got to be PC, and I'm going to be offended by everything that you're offended by. So don't
Right.
offend me because I'm offended.
Right.
And it's unfortunate that we live in that society now.
Mm-hmm.
But when you crossed the picket line back then and got labeled a scab, it didn't matter who you worked for. That's it. Your career was almost predetermined to be difficult from that point forward, if not non-existent. You know,
it still is for some of the flight attendants who crossed the picket line back then. When I became a flight attendant, back in 1995, and this was after I had transferred from Kennedy to Miami, because I spent 4 months in Miami as a gate agent. Some of the flight attendants were still talking about it, and when you would fly with some of the flight attendants who did not cross the picket line, they were very vocal with the new hires. This person is so and so, they're a scab, and you should know this. You should not be nice to them, and yada yada. I mean, they were telling you what you should be, how you should be behaving towards these individual flight attendants. I didn't agree with that, but because I wasn't a flight attendant at the time, so I didn't agree with that.
Yeah.
But I did experience the strike.
Yeah.